peg. This where the real ones show up. Stand there for the ones who know what's up. It's the album where the realest pull up. Game over, that's when the truth fall out the cup. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Last call, Sutton and Simmons. Last call, uncut opinions. Last call, what the polish won't say. Pull the stool up, the rounds on the way.
And welcome back to Sutton and Simmons. And we are privileged to have our very first guest on the podcast. I'm Sutton, that's Simmons. And we're going to introduce somebody right now whose broadcasting journey took him from calling games at the local Harbor Fields High School all the way to the Yankee Stadium booth. And that is none other than Emmanuel Berbari. Emmanuel, welcome to the show.
Guys, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be the first guest here.
Yeah, so listen, we've been doing this now not too long, just the first few episodes in, and when we saw the opportunity to bring you on, it was like a dream come true. Tremendous fans of your work. We're going to get into everything. We're going to peel the onion back a little bit, but we're
Good morning, Emmanuel. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, brother, that's Simmons, by the way.
Hey, Simmons.
So, Emmanuel, you worked alongside probably the most iconic and most well-known broadcasters, at least local on the circuit over here, and even around the country, and that's John Sterling. Emmanuel, when the news broke last week, when John passed, what was your first reaction?
Yeah, it was a tough morning, and it's one of those times where you know it's possible and you know it could be coming, but it's different when it's real, and it's different when it hits you. So it was a tough mix of emotions, but as the day progressed, and I kind of found this to be the case at the stadium too, not just for me, it rightfully turned into a celebration of an amazing life. Like John Sterling, on top of broadcasting and his love of the game and his love of the Yankees, he accomplished everything he wanted to in life between his family and his broadcast, the way he owned it, and he was completely authentically himself. So it was sad because it's a person you're close with and a mentor of yours and somebody who meant a lot to your life. Like before I even met John, he meant a lot to me getting into this field in the first place. And seeing him go, that's never easy. But I think everybody acknowledged, as much as this is, wow, we missed the guy immensely. He had an amazing life, and let's celebrate that. I think that's what everybody did.
So, Emmanuel, you worked with him, you sat next to him, you filled in for him, and I think you just alluded to it. What was John like when the microphones were off, and what people, maybe misunderstood the most about him? And I think you just mentioned that in terms of him helping you get into the industry and such. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, if you talk about misunderstanding, the one misunderstanding is that here's this guy who's a showman on the air and is incredibly entertaining. And I think people tend to take that as, oh, wow, that can't be a great guy. Like, that's a guy who's about himself. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Like John Sterling, who you get on the air in terms of the booming voice and the character you get on the air, that's exactly who he is. Like, don't be wrong about that. But at the same time, he is this kind-hearted, really genuinely nice guy. So the fact he had somebody who was, think about the age gap between us. That's like almost 60 years.
Right.
And here's a guy who understood I was once coming up in this business, and he would reflect on that a lot with me about his first stops in the industry and what he did to start out and the different teams he called. He reflected on his Atlanta days, and I just thought he was so gracious for somebody who had been there for so long and was genuinely kind to everybody he came across. It could have been me. It could have been stadium staffers. It could have been the person driving him to the stadium. Anybody. He was kind, and he was the same person to everybody.
So I had the opportunity of meeting John a few years back, and the one thing that I took away was he refers to himself or referred to himself in the third person. I was so confused for the longest time. I'm like,
those are some of the funniest moments when he would talk to himself in certain times, in certain instances. And then also, he had such an ability to go from that mode where maybe he's talking to himself or making some remark or reading a book. It would be the sixth inning and we'd be at break and he'd just open up the book that he was reading. and this could be a tight game, a playoff game. And in a second, the producer gets in his ear and says, "Go, close the book." We head to the bottom of the sixth. Like it was an amazing ability to just. He'd been doing it for 60 years, so he could pivot, and there was that muscle memory of, "Oh yeah, I'm just here doing my thing," and he could still deliver that a call to you right after that. So it was an amazing thing to watch.
You know, Emmanuel, in a very strange way, your own story now becomes very tightly connected to his.
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't. It's a good way to put it because I haven't thought about it much that way. But I'm really fortunate that I got the 3 years I did with them. Like thinking about the timeline of my career beginning, and that him being my broadcast hero. Like when I was growing up, listening to Yankee baseball and even entertaining this is something I wanted to do. That's a soundtrack right there. That's a guy you romanticize what his life must be like. So the fact we got any overlap is actually remarkable, and that'll always stick with me. Like wherever my life goes, like my early years, John Sterling will be a major theme in those early years.
And Emmanuel, to add to that, I think it's so rare. Like I coach, at a younger level, high school ball. At one point I was doing like middle school, but it's rare for someone at such a high age in life to be able to connect. It just shows that he wasn't just someone in the industry that was great at his job, but just a mentorship to be able to connect
Right.
at such a big age gap, like you mentioned. Usually it's hard, especially nowadays with the way the world's advanced and things of that sort. So that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And it was interesting because I was a sort of person, well, at least when I first start out with the Yankees, you figure you're with the New York Yankees, the most historic franchise in the world from a sports level, and you just want to lay low, work hard, prove that first and foremost. I'm not trying to make any sort of waves when I first start out there. So with John, it wasn't anything like I felt I needed
Right.
to be with him over. I was just grateful for any time that he would spend with me. And he was the type of guy who would go out of his way.
Right. You didn't feel like you were a coffee runner.
Right. No, so like I was willing to be
Yeah.
the coffee
Of
runner,
course, of
but
course.
but John would make you feel like more than that. And he's the type of guy who would go out of your way to make you feel comfortable where I'd have a reason, not to feel comfortable. It's not that anyone's not making you feel comfortable. It's more your own insecurities because you're starting out and you want to make sure you do the best job possible to prove that you belong there.
So when a mentor pulls you
Yeah.
under his wing, it makes the biggest of differences whether it be in sports, a young player, or even in this field over here in broadcasting. Emmanuel, there are certain voices in sports that become a part of people's lives, like you alluded to earlier, the soundtrack of people's childhood. Mine as well. People remember where they were for certain John Sterling calls. Like for example, I'll never forget in the 2000 World Series where I was during that Paul O'Neill Benitez at bat and how Sterling was really like going after it. Is there any specific call that you connect to as a child or along your career that becomes a part of your soundtrack of your childhood?
No doubt. I think back to 2009 and the Yankees' last World Series, Thrilla from Godzilla with Hideki
Sweet.
Matsui, who is one of my personal favorite players of all time. And just to have John have such a distinctive and awesome call on those home runs that took you along for the ride. And I remember that year as well, like Mark Teixeira and Johnny Damon going back to back all the time. And of course, he had the back to back and a belly to belly, right? But the You're on the Mark Teixeira is right up there in my pantheon of John Sterling calls. So those definitely resonated with me. And I remember even more recently, before I became part of the Yankee broadcast team, 2022, Aaron Judge is chasing Roger Maris, and every at bat is an event. Every at bat is theater because everyone's wondering, can he get it done? We had those cut-ins on national TV as well, and I remember number 62 vividly, and the way John Sterling not only punctuated the call, which sort of, if you were a diehard Yankee fan, gave you chills the way he punctuated it, but he also so perfectly demonstrated the significance of what was going on and summed it up to three Yankee right fielders, the Babe, the Jolly Roger, and now Aaron Judge. And he did it so simply and perfectly where that call lives in history, and you can go to that call and you can figure out exactly what Aaron Judge hitting 62 meant. And I found that one to be amazing.
That's awesome. And I think what you just said gets overlooked in announcing is the mincing of words. The true great ones can do it, and their words aren't wasted. Like for me, Bob Costas growing up was just one of the best. But that's awesome insight. I love that. Emmanuel, when did your passion, first begin? I know Sam alluded to it on the intro in terms of you started calling games at your local high school. Did it start then, or was it younger for you?
It really was then. I wasn't somebody. Now, it's funny I say this as somebody who figured it out in high school, so that is a young age, but I didn't figure this out at a super young. Like, I wanted to be a broadcaster since I was 7 or 8 years old. I wasn't one of those people, but I went into high school not really knowing what I wanted to do, which is okay. I mean, you don't need to figure it out right then and there. But I was fortunate enough that one of my best friends was starting a live video streaming program at our high school at Harbor Fields. And they had never had anything like that before, where you'd stream basketball games, any sports game, board of ed meetings, concerts. They never had anything like that. So our journalism advisor was really, really into it. His name was Mr. Ambrosio, and they got it started. And I really didn't have anything to do with the first event, let's say, where they put the first game on the air and it streamed on something called High School Cube. I think that's now called NFHS Network. It's had a couple different rebrandings, but it was High School Cube back then. And I just went there. This is probably the second or third game they streamed. And I just wanted to hang out with my friends. I wanted to be supportive. So if they were doing something, figured why not? Why not help out? They invited me in and they needed an announcer. So I hopped on the mic maybe for the second or third event they were streaming. And I did a December 2013 Harbor Fields basketball game.
Wow.
And something clicked. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I realized in that moment when I was growing up, I was watching the games as much for the games as I was watching them for what the announcers were saying. And when that occurred to me, that realization that I cared that much what the announcers were saying as much as the game itself, I'm like, I gotta do this. I have to do, you can do this as a career. I want to pursue this.
But the passion, okay. But did you instantly say, I have a skill and I can be good at this?
I think that was more so the delusional people around me saying you're good at it. Like I listen back to some of those tapes now. I'm like, oh, that was awful. And you have to improve. You have to get better. You have to hone your craft. But I think I had a weird belief in myself there where I thought I was good, but I obviously wasn't. And the people around me really validated it. They're like, wow, you can do this. Like, you're pretty good at it. And once I would call it institutionalizing it a little bit more, where I went to a broadcasting camp after that freshman year of high school. I went to a broadcasting camp at Chaminade run by a guy, Pat Reichart, who went to Fordham, where the K's and the Breens and the Rucos and the Carinos and the Papas, they all went to Fordham. So I got to tour the radio station and I got to figure out, oh, wow, like this can be done. There's a roadmap here. There's no guarantee, obviously, when you try to
especially in that era, even more prevalent radio.
Right. But I had this tunnel vision once I saw Fordham, once I went to the camp, once I started to learn the nuts and bolts of how it was really supposed to be done. I think that freshman year I was kind of flying, as John would say, flying by the seat of my pants. I was like figuring out exactly how to do it on how do you call a game? It was just based on what I'd seen on TV and heard on the radio. But then once I went to the camp, once I figured out where I wanted to go to school, I got more serious about it.
So, Emmanuel, you called baseball, basketball, done radio, you've done public service announcements, you've done it all, I guess, when it comes to this industry. But let me ask you this. Fordham, WFUV, they produce some legendary broadcasters. What did that environment,
just listed
which
all
you
of them.
alluded to it, but what did that environment really do for you as a career? Like you said, you realized it in freshman year, but like it really, you were tunnel visioned from get-go, that you wanted to be on air and not behind the scenes?
Yeah. So once I knew I wanted to do it in high school, the idea was go to Fordham. And it's funny, my parents are like, you should probably apply to a couple more schools. I was just so focused on Fordham, even though they're right, like apply to a couple more schools in case it doesn't work out. So I applied to a couple others. And I knew once I got to Fordham, as soon as they'd let me on the air, like I'd work hard and I'd try to do everything possible and never say no to an opportunity was really the key there. But once they let me on the air, I figured, okay, I want to become one of these next guys. I want to I want to really work hard to become the best broadcaster I could be. So when I get out of school, again, it's really hard to get a big gig right away, but I wanted to bridge that gap as much as I could. I want to accelerate myself. I was looking at guys like Ryan Rucco, who I was like, whoa, 25, 26 years old. He's calling Yankee spring training games. He's going on to do the NBA on ESPN, the WNBA. I'm like, well, I want to be that guy. And again, you're never going to be somebody, but that's who I looked up to. And I said, okay, just do all you can, get internships. The WFAN internship meant everything because it's right after my freshman year of college. And that was great timing because I could be local and they were looking for part-time just set of hands to produce some shows after I interned. And that led to 3 years of employment before I even graduated. I hadn't done an on-air shift, but I was in their system. And
Wow, that's amazing.
I was a part of their family. So that was all Fordham right there.
There you go. I mean, looking back in hindsight, and how important were the small reps, the games that nobody remembers, nobody saw, empty gyms, the smaller assignments? Did that really help shape who you are? I mean, I'm assuming it does because the grind leads you to this.
Yeah, it was huge. You know, the Fordham basketball game where the team had 3 or 4 wins on the year and you're treating it like it's your Super Bowl because that rep is the most important. Like the next rep is the most important. Remember, I was a sophomore and I really wanted to, I set as a goal for myself, you know, sophomores normally don't call football. Like that's reserved for real upperclassmen. And I figured, oh, you know, we have our guy this year, but if he ever takes a game off, like I want to position myself to maybe get a rep. And I did an extra game because Fordham wasn't home that week, I remember. And I went to Columbia down the road and I called a Columbia football game just into a tape recorder. And I figured, let's get an extra rep. And I sent it in and I got feedback on it. And then I went and did another Fordham game. And there was a opportunity later in that season to do Fordham football. So all those reps meant the world because you're doing trial and error. You're figuring out what works, what doesn't work. You're getting more comfortable behind the mic. So without those, you're definitely not the broadcaster you are.
You know, Emmanuel, talking about play-by-play, there is nobody on earth that is as obsessed with college hoops than my partner over here, Simmons. And I'm going to let him have this segment over here.
I mean, you didn't have to flip it like that. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Fordham. You know, and I have definitely a few things we'll get into in terms of hoops. But just a quick question. Were you there when Pascal was there, Eric Pascal?
No, I just missed him.
Right, because he had transferred to Nova. Yeah, it's incredible that journey. He was, you know, when he was at Fordham, he wasn't even anywhere close to being a basketball player, you know, or being close to an NBA player. It's amazing. It's
amazing how many stories you hear like that. And I remember talking to some people this year who, at a different level, you mentioned Villanova, were saying how Jalen Brunson was such a good player at Nova, but they never thought it was translatable to the NBA. Like that was the consensus with.
Well, at this level, this ceiling.
Right.
I mean, his size
I meant
was
like,
always the detractor.
For sure.
That's it.
Yeah, legitimate impact player. They're like, oh, you could be good, you could be okay, but superstar.
I don't think anyone was shocked when he came off the bench on the Mavs and had some of those explosions. You're right. Then to have maintained that, I totally agree with you.
It. Like it's amazing that he's maintained it at such a level where he's a reliable superstar, killer money situations down the stretch.
It's all about being a closer. We know this as Yankee fans. Mariano is why we won all those years. So you need that closer in every sport.
Closer. And here's this guy who people were like, oh, well, he could be a nice NBA player, but instead he's that tier.
Emmanuel, I think you were probably like the good luck Chuck for Siena, right? So you had called some games for them for 4 years. That now you weren't a part of this journey, and then they make it to the. Oh, you were? You were calling this game this past year?
So this year I was calling the MAC championship game. I was part of their journey. And
talk to me about that. Talk to me about GMAC. What are your thoughts about that?
He's incredible. He's the real deal, and I'm very happy for him getting this opportunity because I think it's where he belongs, and he's going to kill it at Syracuse. He's a full package of understanding relationships and understanding this modern athlete at the college level. Building those relationships, keeping those relationships, but also X's and O's. I mean, hearing him break it down. When he first broke down some stuff to me, the early days where I met him, I figured, how is he going to describe this to an 18-year-old or 19-year-old? Because he thinks the game at such a high level.
Right.
Like it's such a sophisticated way of thinking it through, and he can rattle off situations. Like we'll be talking in our pregame chat 20 minutes before opening tip, and he's rattling off specific plays from like 3 weeks ago. He is so cerebral and such a high competitor. Yeah, he's a full package, and I think Syracuse is in for a good time.
Yeah, and it looks like they got a good nil commitment in terms of package. So I think, obviously, I don't think he would have taken that job without such a good commitment. So that's great to
Right.
see. Now, Emmanuel, you call in the Big East, you call play-by-play. So I kind of wanted to jump into the Big East because I'm such a Big East lifer. Talk to me, what's your thoughts right now about the state of the Big East, right? A lot of, coaches, we know there was a lot of movement in coaches just after the last 4 or 5 years. Of course, now with Dougie, Thad leaving, retiring. Just talk to me about what's your thoughts right now in the Big East. The conference was down this past year. The committee's been down on them the last few years. What's your thoughts just inside? You got a better pulse of what's happening within.
I think it has a strong foundational place right now where you have, even though you mentioned weakness in terms of,
I mean, Pitino and Hurley are holding up that conference.
right, right. Beyond the top juggernauts, like it's important that you have those teams pulling it out on the biggest stage because that's immediate visibility. And you're not talking about two teams that are good, you're talking about two teams that are national title contenders and going at it. So that's a good place to start from. And then I really thought the Willard hire at Villanova was a big deal because I think for the Big East, in addition to St. John's and UConn right now, and there will be other teams that emerge, undoubtedly, but beyond the top two, having somebody who's been there, who's made waves in the conference, who knows what it takes at a school like Villanova that needs to be relevant, needs to be in the mix for the Big East to really hit its true ceiling. I think the Willard hire is going to mean a lot over these next few years.
I'm so happy you mentioned. It's funny you mentioned Villanova because I actually did want to throw in a point on Villanova, and mine was they had a Caden Lewis. Imagine as a program, you bring him in, you give him the minutes, you develop him, he blossoms, he's looking like a future All Big East first team player. Now he's out your door. I get it. They brought in Kwame Evans. I get it. They brought in Devin Royal, but and Perkins is back, Hodge is back, so they'll be relevant, but. Is Villanova really a national title contender? I mean, I know it's only early on in his tenure and it'll take time, but just that's the next question I wanted to ask you is just now you see an Caden Lewis leave. That really holds back the growth of your program. And moving forward, how do you look at college basketball within the NIL structure? Can coaches really develop programs, or is it really just a year-by-year free agency, which we all know and have seen that, what it's becoming to be. But what's your thoughts with that?
I think it depends on where you're coming at it from, because even at Siena, let's draw back to the run they just went on this year. It wouldn't have happened without retention. Like they brought back, based on the NIL structure they had, they brought back Gavin Doty for a second year, Justice Schultz for another year, Brennan Coyle for another year. Those are just 3 examples, but they had returning starters, the most in the league. And I understand it's at a smaller level, but based on the structure you have and the relationships you build, if you have enough and you have a coach who can really cut through and say, here's the plan. All right. Like you can leave after 2 years, and the player may not decide to leave after 2 years, but you can leave after 2 years, but here's our commitment. I think there's a way for it to work at times. Now, don't get me wrong. You mentioned Lewis with Villanova. You're going to lose players. Like we are in that world where you cannot bank on the roster returning. And if you do, you're adapt or die in this world. But I think there are certain environments where you can retain.
100%. And I think retention's greater than addition. And I'm actually, you alluded to another point of mine, which was, I wanted to play both angles, but you are completely right. If you look at like the final 8 teams that were left in the tournament, even the last 16, majority of those teams had a core that was back and have been there. Purdue, even Duke had some players that were back. UConn had players back. There were many more that had cores. So you're absolutely right. You must maintain. And you must retain in order to be able to make a run. I think Michigan was certainly, an outlier. Taris Reed, their only player was playing against them that had been on the team. So it was interesting from their recruiting.
And
class.
don't underestimate anybody. Don't underestimate that chemistry and what that means, because normally you have coaches who have a brand new roster. What do we hear the first month and a half of the year? Everyone's figuring it out. They're figuring out, they're feeling out each other. when you have that built-in advantage from the get-go and you get more reps as a collective cohesive unit, that's going to pay dividends on the back end. And I think there's just this assumption that, sure, there will be other teams that are all transfer laden or they're all new that win a national title. That'll happen again. But I think there's an assumption that's just going to be the formula every year. I wouldn't be so sure of that. I think retention is going to mean something.
100%. And I'm someone who's watching college basketball. Like I barely watch NBA college. I'm watching college basketball consistently since 1998. And I think nil has helped the sport. I know there's things that need to be changed. I know there needs to be an age limit and potentially giving guys a one-time transfer if their coaches leave, and then maybe they can't transfer there, or if they have to sit if their coach stays. I know those things have to be sort of ironed out, but the fact that we're keeping all this talent in the sport, you're getting games like that Iowa State Arizona game in the Big 12, absolutely phenomenal. You don't get games like that 5 years ago without players staying. I'd be remiss if I don't ask you about the Johnnies. I was very upset about the roster construction. I thought the team was built like it was the 80s, 90s Knicks. I'm not going to say that Hopkins wasn't great and Zuby's not great and the front court's not great players. But to think that we were going to enter that season, I'm a huge Johnnies guy. I've been living through these struggles, going through it with Mike Anderson and all these coaches. But, to me, a huge regret not getting Porter Moser. Of course, I know now we got Ricky P, but I was upset we didn't get Porter Moser. But how on earth could we have entered the season with Dylan Darling as our point guard? You knew Ian Jackson wasn't a point guard. And I thought that, to me, and I know Darling played great down the stretch, I thought that was the kryptonite to this team.
And I think...
And what do you do going forward?
Not to Darling unlocking down the stretch was huge and changed everything.
Fool's gold to some extent, no?
Right. I think you're onto something that it shouldn't have come to that, right? Like it shouldn't have come to that's going to shift your. It was great, and they just as easily could have won the game and gone a little bit further. But I think they were relying on a lot to go right, and I think the key moving forward, like you were alluding to, is preventing that. And I don't think Rick Pitino goes into an offseason after the way this one ended, not doing a deep dive and acknowledging that. I'm sure he's shooting for not the same level of vulnerability.
Yeah, he brought in a kid from Columbia who looks pretty good. We'll see how that translates. But yeah, the portal, there's still some pieces out there. We'll see what happens. Let me ask you this, Emmanuel, just not to let you go. I know I'm sure you're probably running tight on time. What's your current viewpoint on the state of broadcasting today?
That's a great question. I think it's stronger than it's ever been, and there are more people. If you're looking at the industry, there are more people who want to do it than ever before. So that's really good and strong and healthy in terms of the talent you're going to churn out, the talent that's going to be available, and that talent isn't necessarily all institutionalized. Like you can create a podcast, you can. I always tell people, I go and speak to these high school classes now sometimes just to give back. And I say, if you want to get reps on the air, you have a phone, go do it. And there's nobody you can't reach out to either. So we're in this digital world where I think anything's possible. And then speaking of the digital world, the rights battles between different networks and streaming companies, I think that's all really good because there are more people bidding on sports. They want to be in live sports. So what does that say about the state of sports and broadcasting? It's in a pretty good place. Now, a lot of it will get sorted out. Who has staying power, which carriers keep the games, what's worth it, what's not worth it. That's all good, but you'd rather them be in it than out of it because then they get the exposure and there are more ways to watch live games. So I think it's never been this strong.
Emmanuel, we all know that the impact of social media on the world today, the attention spans are running really, really short. Do you think that factors into a broadcaster's preparation of like trying to get a clip or trying to get a viral moment or just letting things breathe?
Yeah, I think you still have to let things breathe. And if you're searching while you're doing play-by-play in particular, if you're searching for a viral moment, you're definitely doing it wrong. I think that viral moment, it's about the game. So that viral moment should come from something that happens in the game. I find broadcasters really creative and smart when there's a moment where, a player runs you over on the scores table, or there's an amazing dunk that you called. Put it out. Like, people have short attentions. Put out that 15-second clip and build your presence. And people call it building a brand now. But the game's not about you, it's about the players. So always make it about that. I think once that line gets blurred, we get into a dangerous part. But social media and short clips, those you have to have it, or else you're not really putting yourself out there.
Of course, you're human, Emmanuel. What is your, let's call it, dream call? What is that situation? You're in the shower, you're eating, you're in bed. What's that dream situational call for you?
That's a great question. I really think it's probably, you know, Game 7 of the World Series, and bases loaded, and everything's on the line.
Right, I love that.
Those are the moments that really get your juices flowing, because it's everything that player, or in baseball case, that team has built up for, and that pitcher his entire life has been working for, that batter his entire life has been working for, and the fate of their team and their fan base and everything.
And that broadcaster, what he's leading up to as well.
Right, and the broadcaster's leading up to, and now the broadcaster, it's all the next word is out in the ether, and it's a part of forever. Like, there's no edit button. So that's what I love about this business, is everything is built towards that moment, and now you have to go out and bring it to life. And in only so many words, you can either create a call and create a moment and live through those players and really nail it, or not. And that's the money spot. That's what I love.
Emmanuel, some rapid fire questions before we close this out. Favorite broadcaster ever in any sport?
Ooh, great question.
I love that.
Wow. Let's go with Vin Scully, because he's the guy who at Fordham set the standard, and nothing happens without him and all the guys.
And nobody can ever get mad at an answer like that. Vince Scully's the answer.
And this generation doesn't appreciate him.
I mean,
Right.
maybe a little bit. I mean, he was around recently.
I know,
Yeah.
but still.
Next question. Favorite stadium you've called a game in? Get any sport.
Okay, so biasly Yankee Stadium, because that's the home ballpark, and I think it's beautiful. But road ballpark, PNC Park in Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Really, if you're creating a power ranking of baseball ballparks in terms of a city,
Really?
the Allegheny River, the Clemente Bridge, the backdrop, and everything that goes into making that a true baseball setting and ballpark, PNC in Pittsburgh.
We may have to give that one a visit.
Yeah, we definitely have to. What's a harder sport to call? The cadence of basketball or baseball?
I love this question because I juggle it all the time, but I think baseball's harder because of the cadence and the rhythm and filling and finding the right between the pitches. Storytelling. Basketball is great because of the adrenaline and the pace and keeping up with the action and really hammering and punctuating the calls. So they're beautiful in their own way, but I think baseball is more difficult. Actually,
How does the prep vary?
it's very different.
Right.
Basketball, I'm going with a chart as to the 9 or 10 players in the rotation plus anybody on the back end of the bench, and I'm filling in short terms, in short words, their backstory. Obviously, you only have so much time,
Right.
and then their stats and different nuggets on them, and it's all layered in a chart. Baseball, it's more, I'm preparing each player for the series for the opponent. Yankees, I'm pretty familiar with every day, but it's conversations. It's conversations with players. It's conversations with the opposing broadcaster. Hey, what's going on with your team? And that informs a lot of what you're going to do on the air. So they're similar, but they're very different because basketball, I feel like it's very layered. Like, here are the players you're going to see, and you go all in on those players.
Right, definitely. And Emmanuel, what's the go-to coffee order? You walk into Starbucks, what are you ordering?
I love.
All right,
coffee.
so this will happen in 10 minutes time, or right after we hop off. It'll be a venti cold brew with extra ice and a blonde shot.
Even in the winter.
It's 365. I will freeze
Really?
my hand off with an iced coffee.
Wow,
and
I'm 365
maniac.
hot coffee.
Okay, yeah. I respect that. As long as it's 365, I like the consistency.
I like
I mean,
that
I don't know if you
too.
can tell from me, but I'm a Celsius guy. I'm off the coffee program right now.
You know what? I have Celsius is waiting at all times just in case I get into a spot where. Oh, did I lose you? Oh, no.
No, I'm here. We're here.
All right, cool. I lost the tab for a second. Unless I get into a spot where it's late night and I need an extra jolt, Celsius comes
Oh,
out.
yeah, it's number one. Okay, you ready? Random question. What's your favorite early 2000s band or artist?
Wow. Okay. I have a few, but Green Day, when I grew up, Green Day was my initial love of the guitar. So when I would take guitar lessons and I really got into it, I was listening to Green Day all the time. There are a few, and I'm a big, like, I have an early 2000s nostalgia, like, music playlist where it rotates.
Weezer, Radiohead, stuff like that. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
yeah. I'm a big Killers guy too. And I listen to other artists like One Republic, Scripts. Like it varies. I'm not all rock, but I'm soft rock, etc. But early 2000s hits are big for me. But Green Day was the first rock group that really hit home.
There you go. Let's close it out with this one. Any non-sporting event that you would love to be the broadcaster of?
Ooh. Non-sporting.
Since you've already done everything,
It
with
seems like you've done the gamut over here. But
You know what? And I appreciate you saying that. I never feel like I've done everything, but I appreciate that. I think if I could moderate a presidential debate, I feel like I'll be really good at that because I would keep it moving. I would call out the BS, like in certain terms, like you can't say somebody's BSing, but I would be able to move them in the right direction and also really hash out, hey, what do you mean by that? Or if somebody is going completely off the cuff, I think I could keep it informative for the public. And I've always analyzed closely how certain people handle it. It's not an easy job.
it's funny.
But
It's a certain pet peeve of mine. I watch these moderators, and you can see they're pointed one way or another. Why can't we get one down the middle and just like really trying to get the right answers out of the right candidates? But I totally understand that.
You have to hash out what they truly think. I think it's not. It's less about what we're thinking back home and more about hashing out the candidate's point of view. And if you could get that evenly on both sides, you've done your job.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I
answer.
was not expecting that either. Emmanuel, we really, really appreciate your time. I know your time is limited. Good luck today at the stadium, and we'll hear you on the air. And by the way, I have one issue with your turning point of the game selection the other day. We'll talk off air, but
let me know off air. I've been getting plenty of feedback on those, so I've gotten very analytical late at night. What will the turning point be?
Oh man.
But if you're watching the Yankee game and you're like, that's a turning point, shoot me a text. I'll
Dude,
take it.
it actually bothers me. I'm like, how is that? What?
Emmanuel,
I'm glad it's become like a cottage, as John would say, a cottage industry.
Emmanuel, thank you so much. It was great to catch up with you. I'm looking forward to meeting you at the future, maybe at the park or one sporting event or such.
Absolutely. Please reach out whenever you guys are.
Please, you got it. I appreciate it, and have a great one. I'll see you.
Thanks,
Yeah, you
Emmanuel.
too. Have a good one, guys.
This where the real ones show up. Stand up for the ones who know what's up. It's the album where the realest pull up. Game over, that's when the truth fall out the cup. Yeah. Last call, Sutton Simmons. Last call, uncut opinions. Last call, what the polish won't say. Pull the stool up, the rounds on the way.